Awesome. So now you know the insane importance of focusing on the positives and stop, like, just never try to force things on others, but instead bring them into your world so you can collaboratively work towards that end goal, which is so powerful, so huge. What I want to do now is shift and make this huge like statement, because what Dale writes here and what his student learned was so powerful is that nothing good is accomplished, and a lot of damage can be done if you tell a person straight out that he or she is wrong. Because people just flat out don't want to be called wrong. It's just bad for them, right? And so you only succeed in stripping that person of self-dignity and making yourself an unwelcome part of any discussion when you try to do that, which is just harsh, right? And so let's take sort of another example, which is really powerful. And these cases are so typical of literally thousands of people that go through this content, understand the core foundational principles and beliefs in this text. It's so powerful, so huge. So the guy, he was a salesman for like this lumber company. He's in New York, right? And as he's sitting in New York, he's got his boss, right? And everyone's going together, just having a great time. And he realizes that, like, he needs to do what? He needs to be himself, for sure, but he needs to kind of increase his output, you know? And he had been sort of like hard boiling, you know, some of his inspectors for years when they did something bad. So they would have a mistake, right? And they would make an accidental error. And he would go in and he would do what? He would criticize. He would hard throw negativity their way, and it would totally crush their spirits, their ambitions, and their personalities. It was a bad place for them to be. He admits, you know, this was not really good, and he wasn't doing the best thing for his people, right? And he won his arguments, right? Like when he attacked the people that were working for him, and he said, hey, you're wrong, and I'm right. Like, he would win. But winning, remember we talked about earlier, this idea that you can't win an argument. Like, winning isn't really winning. If you're trying to tell people that they're wrong, or if you're trying to argue with them, like, in all reality, all you're doing is crushing that relationship and totally separating yourself from those who you care most about, or that you have a chance of being true comrades with. And that's sort of what happens in this situation, right? Is he does it the wrong way. He approaches it from the wrong perspective. And so he won arguments, but he didn't do any good. And for all these lumber inspectors, it was like, basically it was like they were baseball umpires, right? Like, once they made a decision, they never changed it. And so these guys, because they were so sick of this experience and because of, you know, the way they were being treated, like, they would make a decision and they would stick by that decision and never change their mind, never react to outside forces. They would just bounce right off of them because they did not care what he said. They didn't care what his company said. They didn't care all about him because he didn't treat them well. And if, you know, you don't treat someone well, they will not reciprocate. Like, they will reciprocate negativity, which is a bad place to be. And so what happens is so crazy, okay? He saw that his firm was losing thousands of dollars through the arguments that he won. And so while he was taking this course, you know, he decided to think. And one morning, you know, the phone rang in his office, and a hot and bothered person on the other end proceeded to inform him that a car of lumber that was shipped to his plant. So remember, he's got, like, you know, his lumber plants are over here, and they're kind of in green, and they're like producing lumber. And then they have this orange railroad, and on this railroad they have like railroad cars, and they ship all this lumber out to the clients, right? And so this lumber gets to this blue factory, right? And at this blue factory, they're sort of unloading some of the blue lumber. And as they're unloading some of the blue lumber, like, the manager at this factory is super pissed. He's like, brrr. So he gets on the phone and he calls our buddy over here at headquarters. And he said that they were entirely unsatisfied with this order that had been shipped to their plant. And they were gonna, you know, not unload it from the train car. And they were just super upset. And it was totally unsatisfactory. And they requested that they make immediate arrangements to remove the stock from the yard. They wanted them to come here, take this crap away, and give them new lumber after about a quarter of the car had been unloaded. And I mean, you gotta remember, like, these are like train cars, right? So they're like pretty hefty. So, like, imagine unloading like a quarter of a train car worth of like raw wood. Like, this is a lot of stuff, you know. This is like an industrial operation. This is a lot of wood, you know. It's not easy to pick up a train car's worth of wood. It's tough, right? And so the lumber inspector reported that the lumber was running at 55% below grade, and under the circumstances, they refused to accept the shipment. And so immediately this guy basically got in his car and he started going over this plant. He runs over here as quick as he can, and he gets over to the plant and he sees the plant manager. And ordinarily, under these circumstances, he would have quoted grading rules and tried, sort of as a result of his own experience and knowledge as a lumber inspector, to convince this other inspector that the lumber was actually up to grade and that he was misinterpreting the rules of his inspection, and that this is actually really good lumber, but basically telling him that you're wrong. Look, the way you looked at this lumber is wrong, and here's why you're wrong. X, Y, Z. These are the lumber standards that you're not following that you need to follow, which is a really, 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 really bad way to get somebody to join your side, because you're literally assaulting them verbally, right? Telling them that they are wrong. And so he arrives at this plant and he decides that he's going to change and he's going to apply these principles. And he found the purchasing agent, he found the lumber inspector in, wicked humor. Both were set up. They were super, super ready for a huge argument and a massive fight, because that's what they were used to with this inspector. That's what they were used to with this company. They never had a quality client service experience before. They walk out to the car that was being unloaded, and he requests that they continue to unload it so they could see how things were going. So they start taking out some more wood, getting it out of the train. I suspect her to go right ahead and lay out the rejects as he had been doing, and to put the good pieces in another pile. And after watching him for a while, it began to dawn on this CEO, this manager guy. It began to dawn on him that the inspection was actually much too strict, and he was misinterpreting the rules, right? And so this particular lumber, it was pine white, and this guy knew that the inspector was thoroughly schooled in hardwoods, but not really an experienced inspector on white pine. And so while white pine happened to be, this guy's own strong suit, he was super good at it. And he was oh, I know how to inspect this wood. Apparently it's a big thing. But he did not offer any objection to the way he was grading the lumber. None whatsoever. He let him do his own thing, let him do his own inspection, did not for a moment stop him. He totally separated himself and said, just keep going, just keep going, just keep going, do your own thing. He never asked criticizing questions. You must avoid criticism. You've just got to take criticism, it can be a direct quote, or it can be a question, or it can be a gesture, or it can be your body language. You have to take any criticism whatsoever in your bloodstream, in your mind, in your thoughts, in your actions, and totally freaking destroy it. Because criticism will get you nowhere. It will bring you down. It's a negative. So they go through this process together. They're laying out all these boards, and not for an instant did he suggest that the inspector was wrong. He emphasized that the only reason he was asking him to lay out all this wood is so that he could give the firm exactly what they wanted in future shipments. He bended the inspection in a way that benefited the client, in a way that benefited, the guy who was buying all the wood. And he said, look, I'm doing this for you. I want to do this for you. How can I make this better for you? He flipped the table. Instead of, how can I get you to pay me the most money? How can I give you the biggest benefit is what his whole focus was on. He wanted to add a ridiculous amount of value. And by asking questions in a very friendly, cooperative spirit and insisting continually that they were right in laying the boards out not satisfactory to their purpose, he got them warmed up, right? And the strained relations began to thaw and melt away. An occasional carefully put remark on his part gave birth to the idea in his mind that possibly some of the rejected pieces were actually within the grade that they bought, and that their requirements demanded a more expensive grade. He's very careful, however, not to let him think that he was making any issue on the point. Here's what you need to do, okay? You need to take someone else and they're in this position and you want to make them feel like they're way, way, way above you. Even if you're really tall, even if you're above them socially, you're above them in business sense. You want to make them feel like they're standing on a pedestal and they're taller than you. And you want to very, 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 very carefully implant little ideas in their head that they will sort of grow into their own. And what you don't want to do, right, is force things onto somebody. What you don't want to do is say hey, you have to do this, right? And so the way you do that is by just sending positive, a lot of positive thoughts and messages and actions towards others, and giving them kind gestures, like saying, hey, look, just unload your wood so that we can support you better in the future. And let me know, just keep on putting away the rejects so that we can tell what's wrong with it. And then there's just this little bit right here where he says, he's injecting some doubt about his logic, but not saying, look, you're wrong. Instead, he's saying that's an interesting piece of lumber. It's not forcing him away from his own interpretation, but he's sort of introducing a new one in a very subtle way that allows him to sort of inject this thought in his mind without making him feel like it's just something being forced on him, which is really, 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 really powerful. And, gradually his whole thinking changed. And he finally admitted to him that he was really not that experienced on white pine and began to ask him questions about each piece as it came out of the car. And he said, hey, look, what can we really do here to judge this wood correctly? And so, what did he do here, right? He understood that this guy was clueless, but he did not point out that he was clueless. And instead, he gave him the time to admit to himself that he was clueless and then let him ask for help. And only when he asked for help did he actually come in and explain why such a piece came within the grade specified, but kept on, here's the cool thing, right, okay? People, they don't care about you until they ask you for help. When they ask you for help, that's when you help them. And what's cool is you want to make sure you flip everything so it's going towards that other person, right? So with this example, he kept on insisting that they did not want him to take the wood if it was unsuited for their purpose. And it finally got to the point where he felt guilty every single time he put a piece in the rejected pile because this guy had been giving so much value. He'd been giving so much help. I want you to succeed. I want to give you everything you could need to be a quality woodsman, okay? And I'm not going to go through this process if you're not happy. And so because of that, he really, really felt bad when he's putting this stuff in the reject pile. And at last, he saw that the mistake was on their part for not having specified as good a grade of lumber as they actually needed. And you see, the ultimate outcome was that he went through the entire cartload again after this manager guy left, accepted the whole thing. After saying that the whole thing was bad, he accepted the whole thing. His whole mindset shift, and he went from negativity and saying no to yes, this is awesome. Let me accept the whole thing. Why did that happen? It happened because this guy came and he gave his time, he gave his energy, he gave his value, he gave his insight, he gave his expertise, he gave everything he had to this plant and to this inspector. And he listened. Did not force his ideas onto him, did not force him into argument, did not force him to concede, and instead just genuinely cared about the statements and the facts that he presented. He said, how can we make this success together? The moment he did that, everything changed, right? And so, after he left, they accepted everything, and in that one instance alone, little tact, this idea that determination to refrain from telling the other man that they are wrong saved his company a substantial amount of cash. And it would have been hard to place a monetary value on the goodwill that was saved, because once you start applying this principle and you start really collaborating with others, not only are you going to win small little battles like this, right, in business or in personal life, but on a greater scale, you're gonna win the war, you're gonna win the whole game, and you're gonna have massive levels of overarching success because you win each battle. If you win every battle, you win the war. If you get up every day positive, you win life. It's a simple, simple formula. Martin Luther King was asked how, as a pacifist, he could be an admirer of Air Force General Daniel Chappie James, the nation's then highest ranking black officer. And King replied, I judge people by their own principle. In a similar way, Robert E. Lee once spoke to the President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, in the most glowing terms about a certain officer under his command. Another officer in attendance was astonished. General, he said, how do you not know that that man of whom you speak so highly of is one of your bitterest enemies who misses no opportunity to malign you? To crush you? Yes, replied General Lee, but the president asked my opinion of him. He did not ask for his opinion of me. Secret, in all actuality, is stated by Jesus 2,000 years ago. So agree with thy adversaries quickly. Before Christ was born, King Attito of Egypt gave his son some shrewd advice 4,400 years, 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago. Advice that is sorely needed today. He said, be diplomatic, It will help you gain your point. In other words, don't argue with your client or your spouse or your adversary. Don't tell them they're wrong, and don't get them stirred up. Use a little diplomacy. Show respect for the other's opinions, and never, ever, 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 ever say you're wrong. Always tell others they're right. Because in that situation, any opinion they have, any belief they have, to a certain extent, has some validity. And the only way to really expand that opinion and extrapolate it to all aspects of life and any other situations they might have, and to really grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, is not to say that they're wrong at the beginning, but to say that they're right at the beginning, so that they have the ability to pursue and pursue and pursue to this greater level up here. So once they get to this level up here, then they can look back and then they can say, oh, you can't say you're wrong here, and then they go down and down and down and down forever. They never get to this end point. So crucial to give others the validity they seek, and to allow them to work through the process on their own without initially forcing judgment on them, without initially saying, you're wrong. Because that'll crush their spirits, that'll crush their hopes, that'll crush their potential, that'll crush their opportunity. Right? That makes sense? You getting that? It all comes down to your ability to win others over to your way of thinking, and to show them how they can have so much more success by doing things the right way, by letting them find the right way without just slapping it in their face. It's a very fine difference between pushing something on someone and sort of, convincing them of it or selling them on it. And as soon as you can master your ability to sell others on ideas versus forcing them onto it. See, remember this idea over here, force, right? This is harsh, this is brute, this is very, very ineffective. Versus gently, very carefully showing to them over time and explaining the intricacies in a very understandable way. That's the way to convince people and to bring them over to your way of thinking, to your ideology, and to your success. That's the way to grow teams, build masterminds, and really, 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 really have the most success in any social situation that you embark on. So that's the goal here, is never tell others that they're wrong. And instead, even if it takes 50% more time, even if it takes twice as long, go through the process with them of uncovering why they're wrong without saying that they're wrong, so that they can realize in their own mind, without you telling them, that they might have been incorrect. You might have been incorrect. And you want to go through the process together so you can find the best answer, and most significantly so that you can strengthen and continue to maintain relationships that matter most in your life by caring exclusively about the process to get to the collective answer, instead of just trying to rush through it and force others to your end of it. Because your end might be wrong. People are wrong. I'm wrong. Everyone's wrong. And you might be right. You're right. I mean, everyone's right. But if you can just carry out this concept in any sort of situation you're in, and look objectively like a third party would, especially with investments where you're trying to figure out what the best companies are, this perspective and this mindset shift changes everything. So, it doesn't matter really, there's so many ways to apply this. So I just hope you guys get a ton of value from this. Go out there, apply it, absolutely crush it, and I will see you in the next module. Thank you. Bye.